Alright guys, welcome back to Tardis Talk, where we'll run down the latest episode of Doctor Who, give our theories, thoughts and opinions, and point out a few Easter eggs along the way. I'm your host Smack Talks, and I'm joined by the Time Lady known as Miss Revolution, as we get set to talk Series 10, Episode 7, The Pyramid at the End of the World. This week, seeing a mysterious pyramid appear overnight housing ancient monks who want to take over the Earth, albeit only should humanity actually want them to. To achieve this, they use their very sophisticated simulation, which we were introduced to last week, to simulate events and show the leaders in attendance that the last days of humanity were nigh should the monks not step in and save them. So Elle, let's talk first thoughts. What did you make of Pyramid at the End of the World?
I actually really enjoyed it. I think coming off an episode that I wasn't particularly keen on, I thought it was so much better. It was definitely a lot more straightforward. It still had a lot going on, but it was nowhere near as much as last week. And the only thing I found myself picking at was things that were left over from last week, or things that weren't in this week that should have been there that weren't. And that was basically the only kind of faults I had. I think everything else kind of went with a good flow and made a lot more sense compared to last week.
Yeah, I totally agree, 100%. I mean, we'd heard reviews about this and it wasn't actually as good as last week. But to me, I found not only did I really enjoy last week's, but I really enjoyed this week's even more so. More because the fact that last week it kind of ended on a downer with the fact that it was a simulation and none of that actually happened in reality. Whereas because we didn't have that this time and these events actually played out, I found I really enjoyed it and I really got sucked into it. Plus, we actually got, some information as to what the monks were doing. Whereas last week, we had that full episode, full simulation, and they didn't tell us anything about what the actual plans were. So I liked it just for that fact. I thought this was a much better episode.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Even more so, I even said last week that it kind of felt like it was an episode that didn't need to be there, and this only kind of validated that even more. We got this whole thing with the monks where technically you really didn't need to see last week's simulation because they had that thing in the pyramid which foretold everything that was going to happen, kind of like with the Time Lord technology.
Yeah.
So really you didn't need to see the simulation last week with the Doctor because the monks already had it in this one. And I think I would have appreciated the monks a lot more if they'd have come in as this being that we didn't know if they were good or bad and they were kind of just trying to save the human race and things. And it reminded me a lot of, I think it was Torchwood Miracle Day, or one of those mini-series they had, where you had this alien willing to help but you didn't really know what the cost was, and then obviously it was bad, and we kind of knew the monks were bad anyway because of last week's, but because of that, the intentions from last week where they were trying to kill everyone didn't match the intentions of trying to save everyone. So it was a bit strange. And I think if we hadn't have had last week's episode, I think I would have been a bit more stuck into the mystique and everything of the monks.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like you've just said there, one of the problems that this episode brought up was the fact that it kind of made last week's just seem a bit pointless overall, because what was the point of it? You mentioned the fact that they explained what those threads were and that they showed a year into humanity's future, and that was kind of all you needed. Everything else that we got last week was completely overkill. We just didn't need it. And I think, like you said, I would have appreciated this episode a lot more without all that was seen last week.
Definitely. And I think even the fact that we didn't have Missy and things, that it kind of, like I said, I really enjoyed this episode. It kind of made that episode a bit at fault because we go from having these scenes with Missy to having nothing to do with Missy and practically no word or anything about Missy or the vault. And I don't know, I think most of the things in last week hinted this one. And I don't know, I think the more it goes, I think that's probably going to be my least favourite episode because of things like that didn't need to be there. And I don't know, I will say, I think they corrected a lot of the faults from last week, like the Doctor being blind. It was done a lot more and there was higher consequences. I know I spoke last week about I wanted to see what the trust was like with Bill and the Doctor. That was rectified. And
yeah,
I don't know, I think this one as a whole was just so much stronger than last week.
No, it really was. I think one of the things you complained about last week was the fact that there was so much actually going on in that episode, especially when you try and factor in everything with Missy and her execution. Whereas this week, we did kind of get flashes, between the two places, because we're seeing the actual work going on with the chemicals and the flashes to the broken glasses, the glass actually breaking, different things like that, where even though it was flashing between different things, it was all actually related to that story, so it was all contained, where it didn't try to incorporate all these different things, like the vault, Missy, everything else that's going on. And because of that, I just found that I really got into this story so much better. I wasn't distracted by everything else that was going on.
No, I totally agree. Although I will say I kind of felt that the biological disaster kind of didn't match up to the huge thing with the monks. I think if it had been, I think if the biological thing had been, like I said with last week, a totally different story to like with the simulation, I think I would have enjoyed that a lot more. But the biological thing didn't kind of, for me anyway, it didn't match up to the end of the world type thing. For all, like, obviously it could happen anytime. Yeah, I don't know. It kind of felt a bit of a disconnect for me. I don't quite know why. I think it was more so because of the things where the scientists they weren't taking like the precautionary measures and things, which obviously they would do. Yeah. And I know a lot of that was because of like the butterfly effect, where one of them had been out on like a night before and he was a bit hungover and the glasses were broke. And I kind of liked how that was the lead up to it, that if you don't look after yourself or things, whatever, the butterfly effect, that it can lead to something else. But I think when you throw the whole thing with the monks into place, I don't know, that it started to kind of go down that road, and I was just glad that it didn't go to the extent of last week.
Yeah. No, I kind of agree in that sense, but I don't know, I liked that being the reason. Let's talk the reason behind the world almost coming to an end then, as the episode opened with the scenes of Erica having her glasses broken as she left for work, along with the flashes from Douglas talking about last night's antics, which left him a little worse for wear, but nowhere near as bad as things were about to be in his near future. So these events caused Erica to ask Douglas to mix the chemicals, as she couldn't read without her glasses. However, due to this hangover, he mistakenly mixes up a solution of 118.9 as opposed to 11.89, and this results in a deadly chemical being released that completely annihilates the plant life in the lab. So there you go, that's how humanity goes out. It's not an asteroid or global warming, it's all down to a broken set of glasses and a few too many drinks. So I'm guessing from what you've just said, you didn't like this?
No, I really don't want it to come across as that I like that. I just don't like it thrown in with the monks. I think, like I say, it's something that could happen every day. It's not something totally sci-fi. It's something that really could happen. And I did like that, and I liked how it was kind of an easy mistake. He'd had a few too many, like you said. And I did like the high stakes of that. But thrown in with the monks and everything that was going on there, I think the stakes were a little too high for this threat, if that makes sense.
Right. No, see, I kind of really like this. Like, when everyone talks about the end of the world, everyone kind of thinks, oh, we're going to get hit by some massive asteroid. We're going to get wiped out just like the dinosaurs were. Or, you know, all these superpowers on Earth, they're all going to collide. We're going to get nukes going off everywhere, and it's just going to decimate the Earth. These are all the kind of things that you think global warming, the rivers are going to rise, there's going to be no land left, everyone's going to drown. I didn't really think about it until now when I watched this episode, that those things, they're probably a little bit more far-fetched. Maybe aside from like the World War thing, but this, what we actually got in the episode, the GM foods and plant life, crops, everything like that, changing them chemicals and that accidentally getting released into the air when it's as deadly as this, I think that's actually something that, you know, it worked really well because it is believable. It's something that could easily happen. And if you think back to like a few years ago with like bird flu, how that spread across the world because it was airborne. You've got people these days flying all around the world. And if they're carrying the virus, it's easily going to get transmitted throughout the world. So it's a lot more of a viable threat and something that you don't necessarily think about, which is something that they kind of covered in this episode with the fact that them all kind of thinking, hang on, this must be some result of a World War III, and then agreeing to all make peace to kind of stop that and seeing that the clock didn't actually change, because it all come down to this. One simple mistake gets released in the atmosphere and it ends humanity. So I really liked it. I thought it was a really cool way to go about it. And it wasn't something that I was really thinking could be something that would end the world.
Oh no, like you said, don't get me wrong at all. Like, I'm a really huge fan of Survivors, and I've recently like binge listened to all like the Big Finish things, and it's an element that I really love it. Like I say, because it is something that could happen, and just how much it can like affect the world and things, and it is an ideal threat, and it's not something that we've really seen in Doctor Who. I think if that had been a core element on its own episode, even with like the likes of the Doctor coming in and he was blind, all that as a whole in itself I really, really enjoyed. It was just throwing the monks in and having them as a threat and you didn't know what they wanted. I think that was the bit I didn't really enjoy mixed with this. I think it should have been a lot more of a contained episode, probably just focused around those two engineers or scientists, whatever you want to call them, and then the Doctor coming in last minute and being a Doctor-like episode. I think I really would have loved that, but having the monks and still not knowing wholeheartedly what they want and things, I think, for me personally, it didn't mash. I would have much preferred like a world war, then the monks come in to kind of be the saviours or whatever, and you don't know if they're good or bad, as opposed to them coming in for this. I don't know, for me it just didn't match up as good. I think it's probably because there wasn't as much action for the monks to turn up.
Yeah, I guess in that way. I was kind of happy with it, so I didn't feel like too bad about it. But thinking about it, it is a complete contrast when you think what I've just said there about this being something that could actually happen, something being believable. And then thinking back to last week and that simulation, that damn simulation, how unlikely that is actually, to ever be a possibility that they could predict things so precisely. It's absolutely crazy. It's just completely different. Let's move on though. Let's talk about the monks themselves, because this week we did learn a little bit more about them. Not necessarily loads, like you say, but at least we do have a better understanding than we did before, because we now know that they run these simulations to detect when a civilization would be at its weakest point, and that once it's about to experience a global catastrophe, that's the point that they'll intervene. And rather than taking over the planet, they'll actually offer themselves to be able to save humanity or whichever civilization it is, but only at their request. So what did you make of the fact that, they're there, they want to take over, but it's not like they're invading and doing this out of force. They're doing it for love. They want to be loved, and that's the reason that they'll actually offer to save the planet, only if they want them to.
See, I think for me, this episode made me really love the monks. And like I said earlier on, it's a huge contrast to how they were attacking everyone last week, to kind of being this, like, you don't know if they're good or bad, but they've got this, like, chilling overtone where by the end of it, the humans have no other choice but to, like, give in to them. And even then, they don't necessarily prevail. And the monks have still got this big hold to where it only becomes where Bill's practically the only person left on the planet who can give the monks his consent, and kind of just seeing the humanity like on their knees basically, and the monks having all this power yet never invading or never using brute force, even saving like the pilots on the plane and their submarine staff and things. Even that was like really chilling because they weren't doing anything evil yet. I don't know, for me it was a huge contrast seeing the Doctor on the attack and the monks kind of on the defense but never really doing anything and just using verbal contact until the right time came.
Yeah. No, like you say, I think it's weird because you don't know. I'm sure we've said this like quite a lot this season, but you don't know if they're necessarily bad or if they are good. It's kind of like that blurred line, and I feel like we've said that a lot when we've talked about the Vardy and different other aliens that we've come across. It just seems really odd that they would offer to save humanity in return for love. But it's like, why do that? If they're good, why wouldn't they just show up anyway and do this to save everyone because, they want to and they want to be loved? And actually doing that will earn their love, that humanity will thank them for stepping in and saving them from this crisis. Where it just seems all a bit weird that they would have to ask them to do it. I don't quite get it.
I think that's what I've really enjoyed about the series. Usually we've got someone like the Daleks where they're pure evil and we know they're evil, but in this one, throughout a lot of them, there's kind of been this fine line of are they good, are they bad, and even the Doctor's kind of come on that thing where, like this episode, again, he hasn't necessarily done things that the Doctor would normally do. Usually he'd have this huge plan, but he like automatically went on the defensive and told them to like attack the pyramid and things.
Yeah.
So it kind of makes you take a backseat and think, is the Doctor as good as he pretends to be? Are these aliens as good as the Doctor? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, they're kind of offering the same bag and chips as the Doctor. They've just got a totally different way of doing it.
Yeah, it's all a bit strange. It's like you said, the fact that, the doctor tells them to coordinate all the attacks, and you see the plane flying in, there's the submarine that's launching the missiles. And rather than destroy these, the monks actually, they move them to the place that they are, but actually save the pilots, the crew. They don't actually harm them. So again, it leaves you thinking, and are they actually bad? Do they just want to help? Like, what is the deal with it? So, I don't know, I think there's something else behind it. I don't think it's going to be as straightforward as this. I think they need them to offer in them. Kind of like how, let's think of an analogy here. There was vampires mentioned in the episode. So, say the fact that in Buffy, you invite them in. Maybe it's something like that.
Yeah.
Where, they need that. They need that, the connection, someone actually invite them to it, and then they've got something else planned, so maybe they're going to use humanity to do something, and they'll be their slaves to actually accomplish that task. What it is, though, I have absolutely zero idea. I have no idea whatsoever, because we really haven't got that much information, but I'm sure we're going to get a hell of a lot more come next week.
I think that's the best thing about it. Like, this week especially, it's also more chilling because they don't necessarily want to do bad things as far as we know. But there's this like chilling undertone, the fact that you don't know what they want to do, and it's kind of that whole kill them with kindness kind of thing.
It is. It's like that. I think also the fact that we learned this week that they've took on that form, that doesn't help them. It's like, well, if you want to be loved, probably not the best thing to look like a walking corpse.
Well, even like that small thing of that where they chose that appearance to kind of show humankind that this is basically what you'll become if you don't sort out your problems. I thought that was even more brilliant. I think the only problem
That's cool.
The only problem I do have with the monks is everything from last week where, like I say, they were on the attack and they were killing people and trying to do things. It totally didn't match up to everything they did this episode, and I think if we hadn't seen them last week, they just turned up out of the blue, nobody knew about them. I think if they'd done it in the style of Unit, and I think that's what this episode was missing, a huge prominent Kate Stewart or someone to kind of do that sort of analogy with the Doctor that we've seen in last season. I think that would have added like a lot more mystery to the monks, whereas we've now seen them on the attack. This one necessarily on the defence, but kind of good, and it makes you think, well, are we going to get something totally different next week? And by the time the 3 episodes are up, are we going to be any clearer, and will it kind of ruin the experience with the monks?
Yeah, it does. There's still a lot to be told, and I think next week being the 3rd and final part in this trilogy, we should get a lot more answers. But at the minute, it's not too many answers there, just lots and lots of questions. So there you go, there's the monks covered. Let's talk about the resolution. The Doctor, he actually devised a plan, and I like the fact that this was quite simple, because he decided he was going to burn the toxins out of the air in the lab. And it was something that, it wasn't this over-the-top way of getting past this forthcoming event. It was just the fact that, he asks the lab assistant, what do you do to get rid of all this bacteria? She says, you just boil it in water, put it in the flame. And it's like a simple solution. Of course, why not? Let's just burn the lab. Let's blow it to pieces. So I like the fact that it was a really simple solution to actually overcome this. Although they then get the reveal that simple things don't actually work very well in this instance for the Doctor, because all he has to do is move the numbers on this combination lock. And there he is. He can walk out the lab, let it blow. He'll be absolutely fine. But because he's the Doctor, and because he didn't want to tell anyone, because he didn't need any help and he wanted to do it all by himself, he's stuck in there and he's blind. He still can't see, and because of that, he's trapped inside the lab. So what did you make of this resolution, and what did you make of the fact that the Doctor was blind? Did you like how it played out this week? Because you really hated it last week. I hated it as well, to be fair. But I think this week, it actually seemed to work a lot better, the fact that he was blind. They didn't seem to really show the viewer as much as they did last week to really get that point across.
See, I'll start with the Doctor and what I made of it. Like I said last week, I really hated what they did with it in the ending. I even questioned why the Doctor didn't repair his blindness in the real world like he did the simulation. And there was sort of elements at the start of the episode and I thought, oh my God, we're going to go down this route where Nardole was kind of instructing him from afar what to do and things. And then it was almost when they went on to like the biological things, I totally fell in love with it. And it's exactly what I wanted last week, where the doctor had gone throughout the episode with this bravado that he wasn't blind and he was the doctor doing what the doctor does, and kind of seeing his downfall when things didn't go his way and he was stuck in. Then he had Nardole knocked out in the Tardis and Bill was in the pyramid surrounded by the monks, and just seeing what, by acting the fool and trying to impress everyone and do what he usually does, it nearly cost him the whole entire earth. And I thought that was really powerful, and seeing the doctor finally vulnerable, which is what I wanted last week, totally paid off. And I kind of forgive a lot of last week because of how good it was.
No, it was really good. I think this was kind of the payoff that I was hoping for, because we had the doctor where he was stuck in this situation, and he finally reveals the fact to Bill that he is blind because he can't do anything else. He can't get out of it. He's absolutely stuck. And because of him doing that, because of the fact that he's hid this weakness, or what he's seen as a weakness from everyone, including Bill, and he's gone in there and he's sent Nardole away thinking he can do this all by himself, despite the fact that he can't even see. And it has ended up really costing him. Because of that, Bill's gone and took the only option that she can and give her consent, which ultimately I think the doctor's really going to be annoyed at himself about, because it's his fault at the end of the day. He's the one that's gone in there and tried to do this all by himself with this weakness. And knowing how Bill is, knowing how she feels about him, she's given her consent with her love for the doctor. And because of that, because love's involved, they've accepted it. So it's really all down to the doctor, and it'll be so annoying for him, because the kind of person that he is, he had this beat. He knew how to defeat this bacteria. It was all going so well. And then because of the blindness issue, it's cost him the Earth, the one thing he was trying to protect.
See, for all as small as it was in the episode itself, it kind of reminded me a lot of the David Tennant specials we've already bowed out, where, like, there was the episode Waters of Mars where the doctor was doing his thing, going about it as he usually does, and he kind of had that smugness, a lot like Capaldi kind of had with the glasses, even though he was just trying to hide it. But then throughout those like specials, you kind of had the repercussions of what happens when you don't follow the rules and when you don't take care and things. And I love that there was such a high price to pay for him not going by the rules and not doing what he should be doing.
Yeah, there was. I think that's really the doctor's comeuppance. Maybe you'll learn. I don't think you will. But maybe in the future, if something like this happens, you'll actually tell people, you'll actually ask for help. Well, I don't really see that happening, do you?
Probably not. And the thing is, he has got his sight back, so it's kind of like, where does he go now? Does he pay for his sins sort of thing, or does he just go back to normal? I'm kind of interested to see how he's going to repay Bill and even the Earth for what is about to come.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how he actually gets out of this. Because looking at the preview for next week, I know we don't usually cover the previews, but with this being a third part, I guess we can maybe touch on it just a little bit. What do you make of it? Because it looks really weird. I know you've mentioned that you thought it looked similar to the Martha Jones episode. Do you still feel that?
Yeah, and I'm trying not to point it out because it's obviously a coloured companion and it does look a lot like that.
Yeah.
But just to kind of feel that the doctor's not in control and you've got this like force behind everyone and everyone's praising them, a lot like they did with the Master. And then you've got the companion kind of working sly. Nobody knows what she's up to, but she's trying to save the doctor. It was a lot like that.
Yeah, well, it is. It's like, you know, everything seems to have changed. We'll have the trailer for next week where Bill says that she woke up and that the monks were there and they've integrated themselves into society. And it's a lot like that Martha episode that you mentioned where the Master's integrated himself as Harold Saxon. So I really loved that episode going back to it. So anything like that, I'm really looking forward to. It's just, the one thing I kind of get over is how the monks have managed to do this, looking the way that they do. It still seems really bizarre when you see them in the preview and they're there as they look, like a dead corpse, and people are just accepting it. Maybe that's the way the world is going to be in the future. Maybe things are changing for the better.
Going off that kind of tangent about what's to come, do you have any predictions about the monks and who they might be, what they might represent, or
I have absolutely zero idea as to what the actual plan is or what's going to happen through here. Because if it goes as they've said, then they're going to simply protect everyone on Earth and look after the Earth. But obviously I don't see that quite being the case. There's got to be something else. Maybe the fact that, we just keep getting these enemies, aliens, where we don't know if they're good or bad. That's going to be kind of this running theme. And we will actually get one that does turn out to be bad, even though it looks that in this instance, I guess they could be good. And maybe that even leads on to Missy when she does finally come into this property, because she could also be part of this running theme where you don't know if that person's necessarily good or if they're bad.
It does seem like it's been a huge overlay, and I will say it's kind of only just been turning in my head, but I really wouldn't be surprised, and it's a big throw in there. We do know the Master is coming into it, and we've got this huge regeneration scene with the Doctor, which kind of looks like it might take place next week. And I know in the Veritas there was this huge paragraph about this demon who wanted to rule over the world, and I kind of started wondering if maybe that's the Master, and these monks are a band of Time Lords that were maybe aligned with the Master, and obviously they can regenerate, and we do know now that they can choose the form that they want to regenerate in, and maybe this is just another master plan.
Ooh, I like the fact you say master plan. I didn't think that, but now you say it, if that's the case, and they've chosen their form, it would also explain this simulation, because it could kind of be this Time Lord tech in which it pulls in all this information from throughout time, and that's how it's so accurately able to predict it, just like they actually do have on Gallifrey, where they can kind of predict things that are going to happen. So maybe you could be right.
Well, I thought I'd just throw that out there just in case.
No, it's a good one. I like it. So there you go, there's our thoughts on the episode and next week. Finally, let's talk Easter eggs. There's about a few this week. Well, the Doctor I referred to is the President of Earth, the title that he was given in 2014's Death in Heaven. Then we had the Doctor meditating inside the Tardis, just like he did in Listen. We had the inclusion of the Doomsday Clock, which is a real clock put into place to show how close the world is to global catastrophe. And then finally, we had a reference to Kill the Moon, where the Doctor says it's as dead as the moon, with Kill the Moon also being written by the same writer, Peter Harness. So there you go, there's a few little Easter eggs, but let us know if you spotted any more in the comments. Anyway, that brings us to the end of this week's episode of Tardis Talk, but make sure to get involved and let us know your thoughts on the episode, as well as your theories for this season in the comments, as well as following us on Twitter at TARDIS_talk for live reactions, tweet-alongs, and more Doctor Who goodness. Hope you enjoyed this week's episode, but until next time.
See you later.